So I do things that are like oftentimes uncomfortable, but like also making fun of it because I'm like, I guess I just want people to feel like they can always share with the rest of my fans, like that they don't feel safe or that they need this or this and this, and they can advocate for themselves in that way.
Hannah, or the Scene Queen, thank you so much for your time today. I really do appreciate it. We are almost here and the new album's coming out. How are you doing?
I'm doing well. I don't know, it's interesting because in my brain I always had like my debut album as the thing that people are going to see, like what is Scene Queen, and then obviously this project has moved so much faster than I anticipated, so I'm like having people waiting for my debut album is a very strange place to be in, but I'm very thankful and excited that it's finally coming out.
Yeah. Before we go into the album and everything surrounding it, you also were just recently in the UK. You played Download Festival, which is a cool festival. It was wet and terrifying, but great. Is that a good is that a good recap?
Yeah, definitely. I was really lucky that so it was pouring the set before mine, and then like the moment that my set started, the clouds, like the sky opened up and it was sunny. So people were standing in the mud, but at least it wasn't raining and they weren't cold for my set. But then I was meeting a bunch of people afterwards and it had been raining and they were all standing outside and I was like giving hugs and I was like, here, we'll share like body heat. I just felt so bad because I was hugging so many like freezing cold people.
Those children off your bus. 18 plus, 18 plus. Get those children off your bus.
I jumped off the stage and I like wasn't thinking about it because I wear all pink, so I was in like these bright pink little like combat boots, and then I jumped directly into the mud and I was like, well, these will never be worn again. Like they're just immediately ruined. But it was worth it. I got to give a billion high fives doing it, so.
Yeah. I mean, great to see. Maybe let's just use it as a jumping in point. The festivals, I tend to go to at least one or two European festivals every summer. And as they have gone bigger and bigger and bigger, and crowds getting younger and younger, also more and more open-minded. Like there's for people. Well, I'm sure when you go with your music as an American to these European festivals, I'm sure there's at least one little voice in the back of your mind that goes like, am I just gonna be thrown in front of a whole crowd of true metal gatekeepers that are all gonna be like this? But then you see that There's a great reaction and a billion high fives, I think you said. Great to see that these crowds are so open-minded.
I think like honestly, my music translates I think in a lot of cases better for certain songs like live. I'm definitely someone that like works the crowd and I feel like most in my like highest form of self when I'm performing versus like recording, so
right.
Honestly, like that's the one time where I'm not really nervous. But Download Fest I think was the first time that I've ever played a set where I was just like from start to finish actually scared to play it, just because it was like an inconceivable amount of people there. Like I would hear people laugh at my jokes and it would be like in tears. Like it'd be like, ha 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 ha, because it would like reach them at a slower like speed in the back. So I don't know. Like I think I always try and go into sets being like, even if people don't like my music, I'm gonna win them over by the end of this because I will put on a show if I need to, so. And I think it's probably better that I have that view. It makes me less anxious on tours.
Your music is eclectic, to say the least. Do you then also, maybe not when you're on tour, when it's the same package or the same artist, but when you go to these festivals or like are grouped together with a ton of different artists, do you change your set to cater more to an audience? If you expect a heavier loving crowd, will you choose certain songs in your repertoire? And if it's a little bit more of a mainstream festival, will you change that around, or does everybody get the same experience?
I think in general, my songs live are just heavier. And I think in a way it works because if it's a more pop leaning festival, I get to be like the heaviest person that they're gonna hear
yeah.
that day, which like for a lot of people they think is cool. And then like on the inverse of that, because the songs are so pop while also being heavy, when I'm on a festival that has a lot of like heavier leaning artists, for a lot of people they're like, oh, I didn't know that I could be into pop, because they're like, well, I actually heard a guitar riff that I like or whatever.
Right.
Obviously like you're not going to win every single person over in a crowd,
No.
but like the majority of the people that have watched my sets, even if it wasn't their favorite type of music, you like usually laugh at what I have to say on stage, so
Yeah.
I'll
Okay.
win them
Well,
over in some capacity, I guess.
yeah. But it's a question then, because I mean, when you say like, oh, they'll laugh at what I say and the jokes that I make and so on, and I mean, there's definitely a lot of layers to your art and your lyrics. There is a lot of quote unquote fun, but you unapologetically, if that's the right word, very much open up the door to only your own inner demons, but all the shit that you've dealt with and that you've seen in the scene and so on. And a lot of the jokes are tongue-in-cheek references to not so funny items as well. So how is that for you, where you're like, oh yeah, for thousands of people that download, I was this funny girl that had a really weird fun music and they were having a good time partying, but if they paused for 1 second and truly listened to what I'm saying, they might realize this is nothing to really laugh about. Like, what's that like for you, dealing or channeling all these darker things in a quote unquote funny party vibe?
So I think in general, like rock music tends to be very serious and like often talks about very serious topics that like pop music maybe wouldn't. But I think I try and approach it with the lens of humor, because I feel like when you say the same thing very seriously to people over and over and over again, they almost like want to turn away from it.
Right.
Because they're like, oh, awkward conversation is about to happen. I don't want to hear it. Like, let's talk about something else. Versus when you like say it with humor, people like actually stick around to listen to what you had to say. But also I think like the reason I try and use humor in that sort of thing is like, I guess with my crowd, I try and write music for the crowd that I would want to see at my own shows. So with that, like I'm talking about these heavier things, but I do it under the lens of humor, because I'm like, I want to be able to like have this space where no one is judging anyone else in the crowd. Like with the twerkle pit and stuff like that, if you go in the twerkle pit and you're shaking in the twerk, or like in a circle pit, like shaking your butt in a circle pit, and you watch someone else do that and no one around cares, you're just going to be yourself for the rest of the set, because you're like, clearly no one has any expectations of anyone else in this crowd. Like they're all just here to have fun. And I think like when you open the door to being like so silly but also accepting in that way, it makes people a lot more comfortable to like tell you things like that and like open up, which is also why like with my music there's a lot of sexual content and that sort of thing in it, but I talk about it so openly, because I'm like, if you like say that nothing is off limits, then people will feel fully comfortable with things that should be completely normalized, like setting a boundary for themselves or like whatever. So I do things that are like oftentimes uncomfortable, but like also making fun of it, because I'm like, I guess I just want people to feel like they can always share with the rest of my fans, like that they don't feel safe or that they need this or this and this, and they can advocate for themselves in that way. And it honestly has worked. Like the amount of times that I've, had fans being like, hey, like this person needs help, can we all help them? And like I don't even have to stop the show in a lot of instances, because like by the time I notice it, they've already like found an exit plan for that person and like gotten them to secure and like helped them. So I'm honestly like, yeah, it's one of those things like a lot of people are going to miss the seriousness of it because they can't get past the part where I'm joking in my songs. But also the ones that like do look past that are like the community that I've been trying so hard to have, and like the safe space that I would have died to have when I was a teenager, so.
If you go to any of the recent singles that you've put out and go through the comments, and I know that every rock star tells me that they don't read comments and all that kind of good stuff, but they do. And there's, first of all, a surprising amount of people that'll say, Like, oh, I wasn't expecting this to kick as much ass as it did, but it does. But what is even happening more? There's very, very few negative comments, I find. And either you've got a PR team that removes a bunch of shit, or there's just a lot of people that are very, very positive. But the most important kind of comment, for sure, is, and it comes up a lot, is something along the lines of survivors get this. And so the right people seem to clearly understand. That must be really important to you.
Yeah, I think like honestly, it's one of those things. It's crazy to me because my project is often viewed as like controversial, but any of the hot takes that I have within music are so like not that hot of a take. You know what I mean? Like I'm
Right.
talking about people being predators in the scene, which like was a crazy song that I did that. But the amount of people that like came out of the woodwork being like, "Thank you for saying that because I've had this experience as well, and I've been like waiting for an artist to say it in the way that you said it." Or like talking about like my song "Pink Push-Up Bra," which is like very seriously like calling out someone just for like actual sexual assault and like things that are that heavy in a record. Like I think it's interesting that because it's like presented in the way that it is, that people are like, oh, this is so vulgar and like unnecessary that she would talk about it in that way. But like I honestly have never censored myself because like I said before, like by talking about these things so openly, like my fans do feel completely comfortable like telling me their stories. And like I feel like if someone is coming up to you at a show and like revealing something so personal about their like survivor story or whatever, I feel pretty good knowing that when I'm on stage and I don't have the ability to look out for my fans, that like that person is going to make sure that nothing happens to like another 16-year-old at the show, So
Yeah.
I don't know. I'm very, again, thankful that these people feel comfortable enough sharing these things with me, but it's also one of the reasons why like with the Scene Queen project, I made sure to have this sort of alter ego that wasn't just myself, because I never like want to feel like I'm like the one that's speaking for a bunch of like survivors as Hannah, because like my individual experience is so different from everyone else's. So like I try and do all my Scene Queen stuff in this like broad reaching sort of way where it like a lot of people feel like they have someone like at least somewhat advocating for them, but also it's not like you're idolizing a specific person, because we learned so quickly in the scene that like you can't always trust your idols, and a lot of times people will like use things to their advantage. So it's important to me that this is like a day and night thing, as far as like I become Scene Queen at night and during the day but
is that hard to do, harder and harder to do, to feel that line for yourself?
I think in a lot of ways, like Scene Queen has been kind of a superpower for me in that like it's helped my confidence when I'm Hannah a lot more. I used to be so reserved, and like I've always, like I said, I'm a performer. Like at the end of the day, I've always loved it, whether it be like through music or dance or figure skate or like whatever it was growing up. Like I've always just loved putting on a show. I was that person that or like that kid that would pull in my entire family and be like, watch this routine I made up, like something like that. So I've always loved putting on a show. And I think, but like in general, socially, I've always been like pretty introverted. And I think Scene Queen and being Scene Queen and like having to be that in the business sense and everything, and like advocating for like this project and everything surrounding that has made me like so much more vocal for, boundaries in my personal life and stuff like that. So honestly, like, sometimes it is hard to switch it off. Like there are times that I notice where I'm like, am I really flipping my hair because I like am doing that naturally, or am I like still in my Scene Queen brain? And like it's still like a lot of me in it, but it's like sometimes I wonder if I'm like trying to be the hyperbolic version of myself at any given time. But I don't know. It is the last song on the record that I wrote, Climax, is kind of just basically about like my personal life, and it's the first time I've ever like kind of drawn the lens back a little bit, being like, when the day ends and I'm no longer Scene Queen, it's also important that I have people in my personal life that are like looking out for me as Hannah. And I'm very thankful that I have a significant other that does that. And also just like that song in general is like a love song to also my fan base, just being like, thank you guys for being so open, with me and your personal lives, because it's like, it's made me feel so much more valid in my own and stuff too. So I hope we never like lose that connection either and whatever. So yeah, I don't know. I think it's funny because when I started the project, I didn't know like where the lines of the project would start and end. But
Yeah,
it
yeah,
does
yeah.
feel like more and more each day that I'm becoming more like scene queen. But I definitely, because I'm this hyper version of myself, I feel like in my day to day life, though, I'm like, I never wear makeup or like crazy outfits because I'm so tired. I just like the difference, or like the only thing that stays the same is that I have pink on all day long. Like,
Right.
All the girls in the bar gonna bust his car, take a bow to the glass, then eat his heart. Whips and chains,
You mentioned your significant other, and I was thinking as your reach is growing, you get more and more people that will, not just people that have their own survivor story, but it's also, to me, it feels so important that everybody kind of joins that conversation and kind of gets to listen. I remember from, I once walked in at work into like an internal of the organization was a sort of special meeting organized for like, hey, female empowerment in the organization. And one of the organizers like, oh, you should come check it out. And it's like, okay, great. I'll walk in. And I walk in and there's 20 people there and it's 20 women. And I felt like, oh, am I allowed to be here in a way? But then they said like, yeah, no, it's only going to get better if everybody takes part of the conversation. Is that like, how do you look at that with your music? Like, how do you make sure that, you continue to have that broad reach, if you will, and not just quote unquote just people that from the first moment like relate to those songs because of their personal history? Do you see that different reaction from people, different journeys? Help me understand.
I think like, so obviously, with the humor aspect and stuff of it, like, so we were talking about my songs like 18 plus and Pink Push Up Bra, which have these very specific, like targeted, like, I hate men that do this specific thing,
Right.
and it's very extreme version of it.
Yes.
But obviously, like, my guitar player and drummer are both men. I'm dating a
Right.
man. My manager is also a man. All of these people like met me when I was not at my highest form of success or whatever. They've just stuck around me for a long time and like seen me at my best and worst and like are so loyal to me that I'm like, I will never lose these people in my life. They mean so much to me. So clearly I don't hate all men. And I've never truly said that. But my first song on the record is because when I released those two songs that had these very like targeted things, I was getting a million comments that are like, oh, I would like Scene Queen better if she wasn't a misandrist or whatever. And I'm like, having any sort of criticism of men to certain people will like make you a man hater. So I was like, if you think I'm a man hater for saying that not hot of a take, like I said before, not that controversial of an opinion, then I'm man hater number one. So like I wrote this song and it's called BDSM. But like it stands for two things, but one of them is big, dumb, stupid men. And I say in the first like song, like the opener to the album repeatedly, like, Scene Queen hates men. And I just like say it jokingly because I'm like, if you truly believe that that's what this project is about and not about like, women finding a safe place and queer people feeling comfortable in themselves and whatever, then like you wouldn't like the rest of the album anyway, and you won't get to experience the last song on the record, which is a love song to a man. So like, but also because I have such this like, unfiltered approach, it's really shown me that there are a lot of men in the music industry that think it's the most punk rock thing in the entire world to be unapologetically yourself. And I think that's like the best part of this is like, it has shown me that there are like just straight metal dudes that really like, because they all like have, sisters and wives and daughters and whatever. And they want a different scene for them because they've had to deal with so many like scumbags in the scene, like getting in fights with people and like, having to like watch out for different people in their lives, and they're sick of it too. So I think like by making a joke of all of this stuff and like having it be so in your face, it's also brought people that like get that all of this is in a rebellious sense. And those are the people that I feel like are going to make the biggest change because like you said, like it's as easy as it is for, and I try really hard, like on my headline tours, I'm always taking out women and I'm always taking queer people out as support. But at the end of the day, the music industry is a very small world. It's still majority dominated by men. If I'm cutting
Hmm.
out all men all together all the time, I'm alienating myself from a lot of people that like would help us in this conversation of like equality and whatever, which is again not what I want to do, but I also don't want to open the gates too much, like I said, to where like people that are like, you're a man hater for criticizing a man would be
Right.
allowed in this project. So like I intentionally do put up barriers, but I keep them open enough that like, you know, they're very unserious barriers so that like people, if you're like, if you have a sense of humor or whatever, you'll understand that there's this underlying thing behind it. So I think it is important that there are like men coming out to my shows. And it is one of the coolest things for me is like when I'll come to a show, and it's happened a lot. Like I'll see these like young queer people that'll bring their dad out. That's just like a full on metal dude, like long beard, sort of like really muscular guy that would stand in the back of the show and like have like a Megadeth t-shirt on or something. But like they have this new, they use my music as this sort of like form of communication between them because the dad is like super into the riffs and the like classical metal aspects of it. And they're like, you know, their teen or whoever like that doesn't know how to fully express like, you know, all of their views to them yet is able to use my music being like, yeah, I'm queer and this means this and this is what the culture is like. And look, there's all these people at the show that are like me, but like this community also stands for like safety for women, yada yada yada. So I don't know, it's cool to see like in a weird way, like I got the fan base I wanted initially and that I was seeking out, but I also got this really cool fan base that I never expected of like men that are also trying to uplift
Yeah,
the
yeah,
same
yeah, yeah.
values that I am, which is really important and it is very cool to see.
Down, swap, spear, rough sex, breakdown, line dance, everybody two-step.
When an album comes out and it's about to come out, those songs are not new. You didn't write those songs yesterday, which
Yeah.
means that you've probably already halfway through working on follow-up material and whatnot. This album really, you allowed yourself to go into so many different directions. We said before that the music is very eclectic. You draw from so many different areas, inspiration. So what should we expect for the journey for Scene Queen? You know, where are you taking this? Like, are you going even more eclectic? Are there certain elements of the album that you really like and that you want to gravitate around more? What's ahead? What's coming?
So I think this project kind of, or like this album explained like everything that happened in my life to where I felt like I needed to create this like persona and like have this space in the scene that I wanted to create. And then like what happened in result of doing all of that and also like the finding myself aspect of it and everything and like becoming this character, right? I think the next album is going to dive in a little bit more to my personal life, most likely, and finally kind of like pull back a little bit on like, okay, well, what do I actually like think as a person? And I also think my favorite part of this project, and I mean, you can tell genre-wise, is that like I love surprising people, and I think the next way I want to do that is via some very unexpected collabs with artists that you maybe wouldn't think. Because the artists that I have on this record, I'm such a huge fan of. But I've been very vocal about being a fan of all of the artists that are on the record. So I think people anticipated it. And also they're not that far out of my wheelhouse that like people expected those eventually. So I want to try and like surprise people with a collab that you maybe thought would never work, but like definitely does. So we'll see where that ends up being. I'm not really sure yet. I actually haven't even started writing this record, which surprises a lot of people because I got done writing with this record like, you know, a full year ago. So
Yeah.
the fact that I haven't even started writing the next one is like surprising, but I'm getting into it as soon as I like wrap up this summer school tour that I'm about to go on. And then, yeah, we'll get into it. So we'll see where it actually ends up. But I also do want to try and like, I do love the serious songs. So it would be cool to dive into sort of like darker leaning sounds, but seeing if I can combine that bimbo core vibe with it still. But I don't want to promise anything. And then, you know, I never know what I'm going to do until I get into the studio anyway. So we'll see.
There we go. There we go. Lots to look forward to. Tour, album, and crazy ideas of dark collaborations or unexpected collaborations. Thank you so much for your time today. I really do appreciate it. It's exciting times, and I can't wait to see where this journey takes you next. Thank you so much for your time today. I really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me. It was wonderful talking to you.
You are awesome for watching this video. Click right here to see more content like it and subscribe to the channel.